There's one word that's killing your writing, ruining your scenes, murdering your tension, all of your hard work, all your storytelling destroyed because of one word. Do you know what this word is? Well, we're diving into it. So, let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is... Okay, rights.
Hello, writers, and welcome back to Spooky Writes. My name's Kemal Onor. I'm a horror short story author, and today we're talking all about one word that, if used, is going to kill your tension, it's going to destroy your scenes, it's going to ruin your writing. So, a word so sinister will destroy your writing, it will destroy your scenes, and that word is suddenly. No word kills the tension of a story faster than the word suddenly. Because when you use the word suddenly, you're releasing all the tension that you've built up in the scene, that you've built in your story, all in one go. So I like to think about tension in the sense of a pressure valve, or you can think of it as the scream canisters from Monsters Inc. And the reason why is because when you build tension, there's this kind of pressure building within the scene, and it's the thing that's going to keep your readers interested. It's the thing that's going to keep the readers on edge. It's going to keep the readers frantically turning the pages to see what happens when you build that tension. And using the word suddenly destroys all that hard work. It evaporates within an instant, and it typically has a very low payoff. So I'll show you what I mean. Scene change. The young couple made their way deep into the tomb of the ancient pharaoh. The smell of sand and the suffocating darkness enveloped them. A distant groan, like that of old trees swaying in a strong wind, sounded now and then. A fear roiled in their stomachs. A mad voice whispered on the edge of hearing. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and a monster jumped out, eating them both. So see how the moment that the word suddenly comes into play, all the tension is released. In that brief example that I gave, there's a lot of tension building. We have a young couple and they're in the dark. They're making their way into this tomb, and there's a lot of eerie feeling. There's a lot of pressure and tension being built up from the way that I've described the scene. And then using the word suddenly just shoots it all off, and it's gone within a single word. So suddenly is going to kill your scenes, is going to destroy the tension. And when you're using tension in your story, when you're building tension in your stories and building tension in your writing, you have to release it little by little to keep the reader interested, to keep the reader on edge. You don't want to just have it all explode in a cannon fire of suddenly a monster jumped out, or suddenly he remembered that the answer to his problem was this. You want to let it come out slowly. You want to build the tension, then you want to release it a little by little. You want to just give a little bit so that the reader is still on edge. The reader is feeling jittery. The reader is concerned about what's going to happen. And again, using the word suddenly is going to kill your scenes. It's going to ruin your writing. Now, I don't believe that talking about writing in absolutes is the best way of presenting this information. I think it's important to have restraint when it comes to the use of the word suddenly. Although aside from suddenly being a poor word choice, aside from it being a boring word choice, and just completely bringing a scene to kind of the end, it just doesn't do much. It does very little. It suddenly doesn't add anything to the tension in the scene. It just has it jump out. Suddenly the monster was there. Suddenly he remembered that the answer was this. Suddenly he did blank. Suddenly doesn't do anything. It's a poor word choice. So if you can, I would highly recommend you avoid using the word suddenly, and instead let your scenes smolder. Let your scenes roil a little bit more. Let the tension build. Don't release all the tension in one big explosion. release the tension little by little, and your readers are going to be more interested. They're going to be concerned about what's happening next. So again, here's another example. So, scene change. A mad voice whispered on the edge of hearing. There was a feeling of dread, a sense that some creature lurked in the shadows, waiting for the chance to grab them. There was a brush of cobwebs at their face when they felt something grab them in the darkness. They struggled, but the hold was too strong. A pair of bright, terrible yellow eyes leered at them. They were doomed. The stories were true, the terrible curse placed on the ancient kings. In those final moments, they knew they would never escape the pharaoh's grave. Their screams echoed, but they were not heard. So in this second example, not only have we lengthened the scene, not only have we sustained the tension throughout the entire scene, but we've released it a little by little, and it has a much stronger payoff for the reader. The reader is intrigued. The reader is trying to see where all this is leading to. And if you build, again, if you think about a pressure valve, if you think about a scream canister, you don't want to just have the top be blown off. You want to build that pressure. You want to keep that pressure inside as long as you can. And again, release little by little, just twist it a little bit, let a little bit of scream energy out. We don't want it to be exploding. So think about the pressure valve. When you build tension in your story, it's the pressure in the scene. It's the concern that the reader has for the characters. It's the concern that the reader has when the reader is asking, what's going to happen next? What's happening? What is going to happen to this young couple that has made their way into the tomb of the pharaoh? And slowly, by rewriting the scene, lengthened it, we've sustained tension throughout the scene. It's made it a much stronger piece, and we've heightened the tension. No longer does a monster simply jump out from the shadows and eat our two characters, but we see that we get a sense that the monster is already there in the shadows, and the monster slowly appears, and the reader is concerned. The reader is fearful of what is coming out of the shadows, and suddenly does not work in fiction. Jump scares work well in film and televised media, but they do not work in fiction. Trying to recreate a jump scare by saying suddenly does not work. It just doesn't have the same effect as it does in a visual media. Saying suddenly something jumped out is boring. Suddenly there was an explosion is boring. Instead, you want to let it roil. You want to let that tension build. You want to put so much tension into your canister that the thing is ready to pop and it's ready to burst, and the reader is just frantic to see. The reader is frantic to have a little bit of release, and you have to deny the reader this. You have to continue to build that tension and release it little by little, and you're going to greatly increase the scare factor if you're writing horror, if you're writing a short story, whatever type of story you are writing. It serves you so much better to be slowly releasing the tension and making sure that you are building the tension to a point where the reader is not able to put the book down, where the reader is so concerned about what is going to happen to your characters, what is going to happen next, that your reader will be unable to put it down, and your reader will just keep reading because they want to see where everything leads. They want to have the satisfaction of the release of tension, and suddenly is going to ruin your scene. Suddenly is going to be just a single firework explosion, and it doesn't work well in fiction. Jump scares are something that are great for television, great for visual media, but they do not work in literature. They don't work in fiction. So again, I'm not saying avoid using the word suddenly entirely, but if you can replace suddenly with another word, if you can avoid using the word suddenly as much as possible, you're going to greatly increase the tension in your scenes. You're going to greatly increase the tension in your stories, and this in turn is going to captivate your readers. It's going to force your readers to pay closer attention, to want to read more, and to try and get that satisfaction of having the pressure be released. You can't just be building pressure throughout the entire story and not have a release of pressure at some point. So that's why I recommend that you release a little bit throughout the scene to to build and then release a little, because having your tension at full capacity the entire time is something that a reader is also going to get bored with. So a reader has to have that satisfaction of slowly having things be revealed to them. And you do this by slowly releasing a little bit of pressure here and there, because pressure and tension in your story is going to force your readers to read your work with a trembling hand. It's going to force them to want to see the finish of your story. It's going to force them to be captivated in the writing that you are producing. So again, suddenly destroys all this. Suddenly just kind of throws a match on everything that you've built up to that point. Because our goal as authors, our goal as writers, is we want to keep the reader engaged. We want the reader to fall into the fictive dream. We want the reader to be concerned over our characters. We want the reader to be concerned about what's going to happen next. And you do this through building tension in your story. And the use of the word suddenly, especially if you're overusing the word suddenly, it's a cheap way to release the tension. It just kind of releases it all in like a less than flattering way of letting go of the tension. Again, I highly recommend you release little by little, which is going to keep your readers intrigued. It's going to force your readers to want to read more. It's going to keep them engaged in the act of reading. They're not going to be able to put the book down if you release the tension little by little. So again, avoid suddenly, and thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep it spooky. Suddenly, keep it spooky. And of course, here's your writing prompt for sticking around all the way to the end. Deep underground, they heard blank. So set your timer and start writing. Thank you so much.
And now we must return to the shadows.